Dr. Jack Kevorkian is a murderer. Well, according to the state of Michigan, that is what he was found guilty of. Dr. Jack Kevorkian was a popular assisted suicide and euthanasia advocate during the 1990s. In the early 90s, euthanasia was not against the law in Michigan, even though Dr. Kevorkian was tried multiple times until he was found guilty of second-degree murder in 1999. The court case was later taken to the Michigan Supreme Court, and in 2001, the Supreme Court decided that euthanasia would become illegal in the state of Michigan. Dr. Jack Kevorkian is currently serving a 10 to 25-year sentence. In the euthanasia debate, it is usually brought up that we are taking away the rights of patients who may have to receive it. But what about all the physicians that feel those suffering do have a right and want to help end their suffering? Usually, physicians and nurses are the ones who have to witness these people suffering firsthand. It may take some time, but we can fix this injustice together for both victims. First off, as a people, we have to let our voices be heard. We may or we may not experience a terminal illness in our lives, but we have to fight for a basic human right. We have to call our politicians, and we have to use our sources such as mass media and social media. And now for our Supreme Court and lawmakers. If and when this issue is brought up, they also have to see how this is taking away human rights from Americans. Together, we can gain a choice that every suffering human being should have. According to surveys conducted this year by Gallup.com's Andrew Dugan, 54% of medical practitioners believe euthanasia should be legal, and 68% of the American public believe that euthanasia should be legal, and 56% of the public find it morally acceptable, and the use of the word suicide does not seem to temper support at all. If you haven't noticed, according to these surveys, the majority of Americans believe that those suffering should have the choice to die. So it is obvious that people morally do feel for those suffering, and more Americans feel that those suffering should have a choice than those who don't, including physicians and people who may be terminally ill. Now we have to take a stand and fight for these people so one day they can have the right to die. With enough nationwide interest, we can expect change. There has been many examples of change happening through peaceful protest. When a topic gains enough popularity around the country, the United States Supreme Court will have a better chance of discussing that issue. And I believe this could very well be an issue that they find that when euthanasia is illegal, it is going against American citizens' rights. But the Supreme Court is not the only place where we could find a solution. We can also make it clear to our congressmen that we, the people, want change. And this is really where making our voices heard can go a long way. The legislative branch can rightfully make laws across the nation, and the legislative branch can make a law that would states doctors can help patients to end their lives when they freely express, which is very similar to the law in Belgium. And I also believe that when this law is passed, physicians such as Dr. Jack Kevorkian should be released for doing a service that they believe was the right thing to do for those suffering. We are currently behind other nations in this issue. In fact, our neighbors to the north of us, Canada, just passed a bill in June of this year that makes euthanasia legal nationwide. This is a great example that change can actually happen in our country. It is our duty to fight for those who want to have a choice to end their suffering. In the 2001 article, the British Medical Journal titled "Why Active Euthanasia and Physician-Assisted Suicide Should Be Legalized, If Death is in a Patient's Best Interest, then Death Constitutes a Moral Good," Len Doyle and Leslie Doyle state that if death is inevitable and it is the patient's best interest, they have a right to help in ending their suffering. Once again, the majority of Americans believe that those suffering should have the right to die, so we need to make our voices heard. For those like Dr. Jack Kevorkian, who served or are serving a prison sentence for helping in what they believe is a human right. For those who are suffering through a terminal illness, that believe that having the choice to end their suffering is a human right. For anybody who may know someone who has to make this very hard decision and believes that they should have a choice because it is a human right. And for the majority of Americans who believe it is a human right, we fight. We call our politicians. We express ourselves on social media. We protest peacefully for those suffering. We urge our politicians to make a law that can end the suffering of thousands of Americans who did not choose to become terminally ill. And then our politicians follow through and pass a law. Our Supreme Court gives us a human right that other countries already have given to their people. And together we can gain a choice that every suffering human being should have. Thank you.